Hello guys, welcome back. In this very video, I'm going to share with you how to use a multimeter to test a capacitor. This is called a capacitor. I have 3 of them. This is also a capacitor and this one is also a capacitor. Now, to safely test a capacitor, we have 4 basic steps to follow in order to avoid any electrical shock. And the first step says disconnect the power in the capacitor. I have this capacitor connected to this circuit breaker. We have 500 volts AC, 50 to 60 Hz frequency written on this capacitor, and I have it connected to this single phase voltage, that is 220 volts AC. So what I have to do is to disconnect the power in the capacitor. So first of all, I'll turn off the circuit breaker. I have it turned on. Turn it off as a disconnection, and also remove this from the circuit breaker. Have it removed. And the second step says discharge the capacitor safely. Now, if you want to test a capacitor after removing it from the circuit breaker or any other electrical circuit that you have your capacitor connected to, after removing it from the circuit or disconnecting it from the circuit, what you have to do is to discharge the capacitor safely. A capacitor can give electrical shock, so after removing it, you have to discharge it. But a capacitor to give you a shock, it depends on the rating. So what you have to do is to discharge the capacitor after removing it from the circuit. So what I have to do is to discharge it this way. Okay. Right now I've discharged it. You can also use a screwdriver to touch the 2 ends. It's going to work. Now let's see it again. Let me connect it to it. Okay, now let me discharge it. This capacitor I'm having here is 2.8 microfarad. We also have this one as 25 microfarad. With this 2.8, you see how it sparked. Let's try it again. Okay, this is how it sparked. And imagine this 25 microfarad capacitor. It is going to be a big spark. So it is very important to discharge the capacitor safely. You can use your screwdriver after removing it from the circuit. Just do it something like this and it is going to be discharged, the capacitance. And the third step says prepare for the test. Let me turn it off. So what I have to do is to tune the multimeter to where we have the capacitor symbol for the measurement. So you have it tuned to this section. This is where we have the symbol for the capacitor. You're about to check the capacitance of this capacitor. This component is the capacitor. The test that you are about to do is the capacitance test. So what I have to do is to prepare for the test. That is what I've done right now. I've tuned the selector to the capacitance measurement symbol. And the last step says conduct the test. So after disconnecting the power in the capacitor, the second step says discharge the capacitor safely. We have discharged it. The third step says prepare for the test. That is when how to tune the selector to this measurement we have here. That is the capacitor symbol. This is the selecting knob. So I can actually switch from symbol to symbol. Okay. We have this symbol here representing a capacitor. And you have the knob also selected to that, meaning we are about to check the capacitance. And the last step says conduct the test. So after doing all this, I have to finally conduct the test. So what I have to do is to connect one probe to one side of the wire and the other one to this side. And before we do that, you could see that we have auto range on this multimeter. We have NF, that is the nanofarad. This capacitor is in microfarad. And we have nanofarad here, NF, nanofarad. We also have auto range, meaning the auto range we have here is going to select the actual reading for you. If the capacitor is in microfarad, it's going to select it. If it is in nanofarad, the auto range we have here is going to help you do that. If it is in picofarad, it's going to do that for you. Or even millifarad. The auto range we have here is going to do that. Now we have the nanofarad, and it is at the auto range section, meaning it is going to do the selection for you. If your capacitor is in whatever farad, it is going to select that for you. How to do is to do it this way. Okay. Now we have 2.6 microfarad. You can see that we have something like letter U, but it's not actually U, and F. That is the unit of a capacitor, farad. So we have the microfarad here, as I said. This is in auto range, so it's going to select the actual reading that's supposed to select. That is the meaning of the auto range we have at the down here. On this capacitor we have 2.8 microfarad and the reading is showing 2.6 microfarad. Okay, let's check another one. This is 25 microfarad plus or minus 5%. This is also 500 volts AC. Now, when testing a capacitor, you don't have to bring your hand close to the wires of the capacitor, or you don't have to touch the wires of the capacitor when doing the testing. Now look at this. The multimeter is actually reading my body capacitance. So the moment you touch the wires with your hand, it is also going to read your body capacitance to rate, and the reading is going to be incorrect. You are not going to be having the right readings. So it's very important not to touch the wires with your hand when you are testing a capacitor. Okay, we are testing this 25 microfarad capacitor. You have to have a steady hands. If your hands keep shaking, you're not going to be having the right reading. And we are having 25 microfarad as we have it on the side here. Okay, let's check the red one. On the side here we have 3 microfarad. That's the value of this capacitor. This capacitor that we are testing is 3 microfarad capacitor, and we are having 2.9 microfarad. So basically that is how to test a capacitor. And mind you that whenever you are testing a capacitor, there is no need for you to connect the capacitor to the power source and then you short circuit. And upon the sound that came out, you use that to determine whether the capacitor is in good condition or it is not in good condition. It is actually improper way of testing a capacitor. If you want to know the actual reading, just use a multimeter to test. Now look at this. Let me turn it on. Okay, this is how some people test a capacitor. If your capacitor is dead and you do it this way, there's going to be a spark. And you might think that the capacitor is in good condition, but it is not. So it is very important to abstain from this practice. Now this is 3 microfarad capacitor. And let's assume that this capacitor is losing its capacitance. And the 3 microfarad we have here is no more 3. It has turned to 0.5. When you do it this way, you charge it and discharge it, it's still going to sound. Others will say that if the capacitor has low capacitance, the sound of the spark is going to be small. If the capacitance is also high, the sound of the spark is going to be high. This improper way of doing it, though it is going to work, but that is not correct. Let me go over the steps again. The first step is to disconnect the power and the capacitor from the circuit. And number 2 is to discharge the capacitor safely. After removing it or disconnecting it, you have to discharge it safely. You do it this way, the power is going to be discharged. Number 3 says prepare for the test. That is when you select the capacitor symbol that we have here. And finally, you conduct the test. That is number 4. So guys, that is how to test a capacitor.